Now, what we really want to show you, okay, and this is the really important thing. What you'll generally see with strong companies that are in their growth phase, you'll find that when the stocks are doing well, the PE is actually the highest, or it could even start at the highest and maybe even get the PE will come down as the stock advances. And then when the stock tops and it's much higher, and now it rolls over and starts getting, quote unquote, looking cheap, the PE gets to the lowest just before it's going to make a big decline, which is the exact opposite of what most people would think. You would think it's very cheap before it makes a big move, and then it would be very expensive when it tops, right? It doesn't work that way. Here's an example looking at Crocs. You can see that before it makes a 400% advance, the PE is up around, 60 times earnings, right? It's the highest that the PE was since the stock went public. Right here, stock starts rolling over, and just before it comes off 90%, a 90% decline in only maybe a year, the PE is at the lowest before the decline. So it's the cheapest before it's going to make a 90% decline. It's the most expensive before it's going to make a 400% advance. This is completely counterintuitive to what most people would think. Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
On that Crocs example, when that stock came off of from 75 down to, I guess, 45 in 1 week, that was actually on an earnings report, and the earnings report was really, really good. But it wasn't as good as people expected, and growth was going to start slowing down, and that's why that stock took a hit. I was in that stock. I sold that stock, or I sold most of it, but I was still in it on that first day down, and then I just sold the rest. But I was out, I think, probably above 60, and then by the end of the week, it was all the way down at 45. But the key is always keep those losses small, and you don't want to compound a losing trade by adding to it. That's the first rule I've always used, is never add to a stock that you're losing on, and because you can see what can happen.
And the reason why we're telling you this now with this valuation section is because you can start rationalizing and coming up with, the stock's cheap, and you might even hear this. Maybe a broker tells you, or you see it on the TV, and somebody talks about how the stock is cheap. This is where you can really get caught into that cheap trap, and you got to be real careful. You want to buy. It doesn't matter if you're buying expensive stocks, as long as they get more expensive, right? So again, let me show you another example here. This is one that David and I both bought. We literally bought this to the same day. I actually bought it, and I added to a little bit more. I traded it a few times through this move, and Dave actually held it through a good majority of this big move that it made. This is Ollie's, and this is where both of us were buying coming out of this base here, this primary base, as the stock was making a new high. It was a recent IPO. You can see that the PE is way up here, around 145, 150 times earnings. Even when we're buying it, it's in the neighborhood of 100 times earnings. So, that's obviously, that's no value stock, right? But here's the interesting part. Look at how it makes this big move. The stock goes up over 300% in 30 months. And look at the PE. The PE after that big move is half. It's half of what it was prior to the move. Now, why is that? Why would the stock go up so much? It goes up 300%, but the PE is cut in half. Shouldn't that be getting more expensive?
No, because the earnings are so strong. The earnings are running faster than the stock price is, and so that's why the PE ratio is coming down.
And that's where a stock is priced pretty much at where it should be at any given time. And when you've got that big growth rate, you really can't bake that into the cake, because it's just, no one knows how long a stock, for the stock to go up 300% and the PE to be cut in half, that means that the growth of the company had to grow at a much faster rate than that. So no one knows, not even the CEO knows how long that's gonna last. And that's why these stocks can just keep going and going and going. And the PE will either sometimes get even cheaper or lower because the stock price is not outpacing the growth of the earnings. Now, in some cases, I'm going to show you another example here. We look at Taser. So I bought Taser. This is one of the stocks that I bought after taking a pretty long sabbatical. After I got out of the market and we topped in 2000, and I called for that big bear market. And this was a time where I was going on TV back in the 90s and into 2000, 2001, and talking about basically I was basing my call on these stocks, these leaders that have topped, on the 50-80 rule. I said that these stocks, like the Microsofts and the Qualcomms and EMC and all those names that were the high flyers, basically the FANG stocks of that era, I said these are going to go down between 50 and 80%, and some of them are going to go to zero. And that's exactly what happened. The average stock of those big leaders was down about 86%. It was just an incredible bear market. So I moved to the sidelines and was sitting in cash for quite a while. And then when I came back, one of the stocks that I bought, that was one of the first names that I started buying, was Taser. And I'm not going to get into the story behind this, but it was the stock had already had a lot of news and things were going really well. And you can see here, it went up 12-fold in 7 months, and it was trading at 230 times earnings. And I was buying it right here. All right. And that looks pretty high, right? I mean, that looks not only expensive, but just look at this move that it made, this giant move, right? So I did not worry about how high it went, because I had my plan, I had my stop loss, I knew how much I was going to risk, and it met all my criteria. This was coming out of a very powerful situation. Now, watch this. If we take a look at it and we look at it from where it went, I'm buying it right here at about, like I said, 230 times earnings. Does it look cheap now, 23 weeks later? Stock went up almost 500% in the subsequent 23 weeks. Now, here's the thing to take a look at here too. As it's moving higher and it's coming out of a base here even much higher, it's maybe up 60, 70% from where I purchased it. Look, the PE is lower now. See, it's actually lower. Then what happens at the end, as the stock really starts to accelerate, you see now the PE comes up because the stock is actually starting to outpace the earnings now. So now the stock is growing faster than the earnings, and that's where you can start getting into some trouble if you really start outpacing those earnings too much and the PE really expands. So again, if I were to look at this and use any kind of valuation metrics at the time, I wouldn't have touched this stock. I wouldn't have gone near it. But it was actually quite cheap.
And then one other thing that you should also mention too is that analysts, you might think that the analysts are so sharp and on Wall Street and they know everything about a company, but even analysts are very far off on what they think is going to be coming the next quarter or 2 quarters or the next year, because even they can't figure out how fast this company is growing, and they get it wrong a lot of times. So you can't rely on Wall Street estimates, especially in a super growth stock.
Right. And there's a very good reason why analysts also get it wrong. It's not just that they're not smart enough, but there's another reason. We're going to talk about it later when we talk about fundamentals, where analysts they don't go too far from the herd, because it's basically they're protecting their job. So we're going to talk about that too. That's a great point David's bringing up, but we're going to go into detail about that. Let me show you Apollo Group here, and again, take a look here. This is really interesting on how this stock, through a time where the market did nothing. It was after you had the big bear market, and the market still took years before it bottomed. This stock went up a couple 100%, 200% in a couple of years. Now, if you look at the earnings, these are annual earnings. You had where the stock in 2003 up 40%, in 2004 up 45%, and then up 55% in 2005. So this stock basically started at 60 PE. And after this 200% move, it's still at a 60 PE. So again, why is that? Well, if you compound, and of course, it doesn't always work exactly like this, but you can see here how the stock is basically just the same valuation. If you take the earnings and you were to take these earnings and you compound this 40 to 45 to 55, guess what? The earnings are 200% higher. So the stock, even though it's 200% higher, it's valued the exact same as it was 200% lower. You see, market's unchanged, PE is unchanged, stock's up 200%. Why? Because the earnings grew at 200%.